Once upon a time, there was a girl named Julia. Now, from a very young age, Julia loved to read. It didn't matter to her whether it was her older brother's mystery novels, Saturday morning comics, or fairy tales about princes and princesses, she would read it all. Bookstores and libraries could provide hours of entertainment for her as she sifted through book after book. As Julia grew up and continued throughout elementary school, her love of books began to slowly fade. Soon there were no more bedtime stories, no more trips to the bookstore, and no more reading the same novel over and over again. You see, when Julia turned 7, her best friend moved in down the street, and suddenly that's where Julia spent all of her time. She began to realize how much fun it was to be with her friends and go on adventures in the real world, and no longer desired to spend time by herself reading a book in some fantasy world. She hated being by herself and always needed to be around other people and out and about in the world, leaving no time for stories. High school came and went, and soon she was off to post-secondary. What had happened to the little girl who used to spend hours and hours reading stories? Here is where she met Angie, her professor who would change her. The very first day, Angie announced her love of reading to the class, claiming that knowledge through reading is one of the most powerful tools. She would say that if you hated reading, you were doing it wrong. Instead of textbooks, Angie assigned chapters of nonfiction novels. Julia read the first week's chapter and couldn't believe that she loved what she was reading. She was given books that meant something to her, books about the outdoors and the brain, books that fueled her passions. They weren't some made-up story about people in faraway lands, but instead focused on what was going on in the world around her. Growing up, she didn't need to read made-up stories to escape to some other place. She was quite content in the real world. It was here at school that Julia rediscovered her passion, all thanks to Angie, the professor who would encourage students that knowledge is power, and that if you hate reading, maybe, just maybe, you're doing it wrong.